In class, I hear of the horrors of child starvation. I have to do something.
In class, we discuss the terrible loss of innocent life. I have to do something.
In class, we talk about the people being shot in the streets and the racism abounding in America. I have to do something.
The climate is changing and landfills overflowing. Babies are being aborted and children are growing up on the streets. They cease to be safe in their own schools. Regardless of where anyone stands politically, we can all agree there are a lot of issues, hurts, and injustices happening in the world right now. We hear about them daily. These issues weigh us down, burden our consciences, and leave us feeling hopeless. There's so much wrong in the world that oftentimes we feel as though we can do nothing, or we don't know where to start. Or maybe the opposite. We hear of so many things wrong that we try to change all of it, and we leave ourselves feeling burnt out and feeling bitter.
We're standing here this morning acknowledging all of this, and still we're going to ask you to take up one more fight. We're asking this of you because this issue permeates everything we do, and it's directly contributed to by us without us even knowing it. 20 to 30 million people live in slavery today, and it's our job to fight such an atrocity. It affects each of us, and it's worth our time to fight, to end the trafficking of human life.
This fall, we were the students, gripped by yet again another issue. We felt moved to do something, and so here we are. Knowledge of the issue is the first step. Darkness hides the evils of the world, but the light drives out the darkness. We want to bring the light of knowledge into the darkness of trafficking. So here's what we learned, what really stirred us in COM 301.
Human trafficking is the buying and selling of people as though they were a commodity of convenience. It's made up of two major industries, the labor and sex industry. The labor industry has three primary forces: cocoa, coffee, and clothing.
We're asking this of you today because this issue permeates everything we do, everything we buy, and everything we consume. It is directly contributed to by us without us even knowing it.
There's a man who was traveling through the Ivory Coast. As he traveled, he encountered a young boy named Ibrahim. Ibrahim had moved with his father to the Ivory Coast at a very young age. He doesn't remember how old he was, but when he arrived, he began working on a cocoa farm. In an interview, a man asks, "What about school?" "No," Ibrahim answered, "I've never been to school." "Is the work hard?" "Yes," the boy answered. "It's very hard." There are thousands of young boys who are taken from their homes and placed in the Ivory Coast to work and harvest on cocoa farms, never getting the wages they were promised, if any income at all. These young boys work 14-hour days and are beaten when they work too slowly. While they have never tasted chocolate, they work all day to produce it for others. We wish that this was the only story, but this is one of thousands of real children forced to work in these conditions. But still, there is hope.
Since he was a young child, Alberto has been working on local corn and coffee farms in western El Salvador to help his family earn a small income. At the end of a 4 a.m. to 6 p.m. workday, threatened by snakes, rats, and worst of all, unkind adults, a tired and hungry Alberto comes home to his large family and their one-room house made of clay and wood. Kids are taken out of school, and they toil in the fields for up to 14 hours a day. Injuries often result from extended heat exposure, poisonous agrochemicals, heavy lifting, and other sharp tools involved in the coffee processing procedure. A study in Brazil found that child labor rates were approximately 37% higher and school enrollment 3% lower than average in regions where coffee isn't produced. We wish this was the only story, but it's one of thousands as real children are forced to work in these conditions.
But still, there's hope.
This is Flor. She's a single mother of 3 from Mexico. When one of her oldest children was hospitalized, the bills quickly added up, and soon Flor had no way to even provide basic needs like food and shelter for her family. So she began to take sewing lessons in hope of starting her own business one day. Unbeknownst to her, Flor's sewing teacher had been approached by a trafficker from the US who was looking for seamstresses to take back to America. After being offered a position in LA, Flor eagerly accepted with dreams of a promising future in her head. It wasn't long after Flor arrived that she realized she'd been trafficked. She was forced to work all day in the factory, and when the rest of her coworkers finished their shift and went home, Flor and a few other trafficked victims had to stay and clean the factory. The lodging she had been promised was simply a dirty mattress that she shared with another victim in a storage room in the factory. She was fed one meal a day and had to eat it within 10 minutes or was punished. She was never allowed or even let outside the factory. One of Flor's coworkers became concerned after noticing that Flor never seemed to leave the factory and always looked tired, exhausted, and malnourished. She slipped Flor a piece of paper with her phone number on it and told her to call if she ever needed anything. At this point, Flor had been so taken advantage of and hurt that she didn't trust anyone. So she slipped the piece of paper away and kept quiet. As the shopping demand has risen, so has the desire to find cheaper labor. In countries where desperation and poverty run rampant, garment companies profit even if it's at the expense of human lives. People are brought into these jobs under the false pretenses that they will make a fair wage and live in fair conditions. Their desperate and impoverished status is taken advantage of. And we wish this was the only story, but there are thousands more stories like Flor's.
As these stories share, in each one of these three industries, people are exploited for the purpose of creating and selling cheaper goods. Their labor and toil are taken advantage of.
Labor can look like more than just the production of these three common commodities, though. It can also look like sex trafficking, the industry that many of us may have heard of, and many of us may also think only happens in developing countries.
Children, women, and even some men all over the world are coerced, manipulated, and even physically forced into the sex industry. Many of these people are kept in isolation, locked up until the next time that they are forced to perform sexual acts, even drugged to help them perform amidst complete exhaustion. Some are lured with false promises of financial opportunity, and some are even sold by their very own family members or partners to overcome debt or to simply make a profit.
In some cases, women have chosen a life in the sex trade, but even this can hardly be considered a choice. Poverty, desperation, and manipulation are driving forces of this industry. Yet these conditions alone are not what makes such an industry possible. In the end, it's the fact that it is profitable and the fact that it's in demand that makes these horrors a reality. In the Netherlands, investigators were able to calculate the profits generated by two sex traffickers. One trafficker earned $18,000 a month from a mere 4 victims for a total of $127,000, while the second trafficker earned $295,000 in 14 months that a mere 3 women were sexually exploited. A human being is worth less now than ever before in history, approximately $90. And there are more slaves today than there were even during the transatlantic slave trade from the 15th to the 19th century.
In Jackson, Michigan, less than 20 miles away, there's a massage parlor where Asian women are bought for sex. There's some pretty disturbing and explicit reviews from this massage parlor, one of which plainly states, "This is a prostitution house." There are more reviews we found that broke our hearts, helping us understand how real this issue is and how close, even local, it is. In the US, massage parlors are the second most prevalent way traffickers exploit women for sex. Sex trafficking and the purchase of sex doesn't just happen in developing countries. It isn't restricted to red light districts in large tourist cities. It happens right here in the United States, right here in Jackson, Michigan, and in cities all over the US.
Human trafficking is a $150 billion industry. That's $150 billion in revenue made and earned each year by enslaving human beings. We cast a vote every time we swipe our credit cards. Our consumer habits, what we shop for, the foods we consume, the things we buy, are votes that affirm the necessity for and create the demand for human trafficking. We pay an average of $20 for a new piece of clothing or an item you shop for at the store, but do you have any idea where that money goes? We want to assume that that money goes to the creator or laborer, right? Unfortunately, it's rare for even 1% of that cost of your product to go to the creator, farmer, or laborer.
As consumers, we support the sex industry and the profitability of sex by watching pornography. Every click fuels the demand. As a nation, our economy is directly related to sexual exploitation. As poverty increases, so does desperation. As desperation increases, people are more willing to sell themselves for sex. It becomes a forced choice. In the face of poverty, people do whatever they have to survive. Alongside these financial conditions, specifically many young women grow up in unsafe environments in their own homes and neighborhoods. And to make matters even worse, our culture promotes this activity by generally ignoring the topics of sex and the empowerment of women.
All of this is super heavy, and as we learned and as we continue to learn about these things, we would often tell ourselves, this is hopeless.
But still, there is hope. So where is it? People all over the world are already fighting this, and people even on our very campus as well. On an international level, the International Justice Mission, known as IJM, has rescued 45,000 victims of human trafficking. Thinking more locally, right here at Spring Arbor University, our very own Dr. Jeremy Norwood passionately fights alongside students and colleagues to bring awareness and to work with law enforcement and government officials to end human trafficking, specifically in the state of Michigan. This passion all culminates at the annual Anti-Human Trafficking Conference each fall. This conference meets for the 5th time this October. Here at the church, the Set Free Movement, a larger Free Methodist ministry, meets every Sunday through a community group to help the local church become more aware and move in action to help bring an end to human trafficking.
If we play a role in contributing to it, though, that means we can play a role in ending it. If one purchase can support slavery, then just one purchase can help combat it.
Think of a painting. If you take just one single brushstroke away from a painting, it changes it, yeah? In the same way, if you add just one single brushstroke to a painting, it also changes it. And if this metaphor holds true, then changing just one of your purchase habits also makes a difference.
We cannot give in to the thought that our small actions will be lost and meaningless amidst all of the depravity. There's a story of a king who commanded all who were loyal to him to bring their best wine and dump it in a large pot. One man thought to himself, surely I should not waste all of my best wine, so I'll dump water in instead. And amidst everyone else's wine, the lack of mine shall surely go unnoticed. So the man dumped water, thinking everyone else would bring wine. Yet when the king opened up the pot, it was filled with water. We cannot assume that our inaction will be lost in the wine. We cannot fall prey to the thought that someone else will fight our fight. If one of us fails to act, we all do. But if one of us chooses to act, hope appears.
Hope increases in the face of insurmountable odds, and Flor is an example of that.
After begging to go to church so many times, Flor's trafficker finally relented, and upon release, Flor headed straight for a payphone with her coworker's phone number in hand. Soon, with the help of her coworker, Flor was talking with the FBI. It turns out that her trafficker had already been under investigation, and Flor's testimony was the nail in the coffin. Her trafficker was arrested, and Flor was freed.
So how can we help change a story like Flor's? It starts with learning more. Our eyes can't see what our minds don't know. So let's open our eyes by researching the issue so that warning signs of trouble don't go unnoticed, and we can bring freedom to our brothers and sisters and fulfill our call to love justice.
There are other ways of fighting human trafficking as well. It can be as simple as looking up where your coffee comes from, buying less chocolate or buying ethically sourced chocolate, researching the brands that you regularly buy from, and even more.
So on the screen, you can see a list of organizations and websites that all have resources that can help you guys in this fight. Better World Shopper is a really cool website that you can go to, and you can plug in almost any company that you shop with, ranging from airlines all the way to technology, to food, to clothing, to coffee and cocoa. And it'll give you a grade based on how that company is doing ethically, and it'll let you know, like A to F, what they're doing. And MAP stands for Michigan Abolitionist Project, and it's a really cool organization that has groups all over Michigan that you can join so that you don't have to fight this fight alone.
A couple weeks ago, I had the opportunity to go to a conference on ending sexual exploitation. And this is just a very simple and a little more intentional way that each one of us can further our education and further our knowledge on this topic, but then also realize where our hearts are stirred and broken in this topic and how our passions align with that and how we're able to make a difference in this area of combating human trafficking. Another very simple way that goes along with that, but goes a long way, is also recognizing where we're casting our vote. So if you have a company that you support and really like their product or something that they're doing, emailing them and asking about their supply chain, seeing where their goods are sourced from. And that allows you to let them know as a constant consumer, as someone who supports them, where you stand, and letting know that this is something that is important to you.
The most important tool in fighting human trafficking is the church. There are so many useful tools, many of which Leah and Alec just mentioned, in the fight for justice, but we can't be using those on our own. The thing that has enabled me to best take up this fight that I'm fighting alongside my peers, among fellow lovers of God, that's what enables me to continue. Having the encouragement when things get dark and when things get disheartening is so crucial. Justice is consistent, and to make change, we have to be too. So surround yourself with a community that will help you and encourage you in this fight and share new resources with you.
We're not asking you to do radical things. We're asking you to do what you can, and we're telling you that together, our impact will be radical. We read in Ephesians 4:15 and 16, "Rather, speaking the truth in love, we are to grow up in every way into him who is the head, into Christ, from whom the whole body, joined and held together by every joint with which it is equipped, when each part is working properly, makes the whole body grow so that it builds itself up in love." When you do your part, you're enabling someone else in the body to do their part. We function better when we all perform our own function. Being a part of the body of Christ and doing justice are not independent calls. And justice is not an optional call for Christians. Helping our brothers and sisters and caring for creation are biblical commands. We cannot fully seek God without also seeking justice in this world. Remember that the light shines in the darkness, but the darkness has not overcome it.
For some of you in this room, this might be one of your first encounters with this topic, and our hope in sharing all of this with you today is that it pushes you to learn more and to fight back, to consider your consumer habits and to grapple with what it really means to love justice as God commands us to. This has been a several-month journey for us so far since we truly learned of the depravity and since our hearts were truly gripped by the issue. We've been convicted, burdened, and moved to action by the issue, and it's no small matter. Just 2 weeks ago, even while we were preparing what we would say to you today, we all had a rough night of anger and frustration and tears at the injustice of everything that we were going to have to reveal to you.
But still, there's hope.
If your heart is broken and you're left feeling heavy, if you don't know what to do with those feelings, or if you just want to know more or how you can get involved in the fight to help end human trafficking, please take a look at the list of people on the screen from SAU. These people are knowledgeable about the issues. They want to meet with you, help guide students in furthering the fight for justice. In addition, if you have any immediate questions, please come down to the front. We're going to be staying around to answer any questions and bring any encouragement that we can.
Together, as the body, we can fight to restore peace here on earth, and we can fight for justice.
There is hope.